Fun Ideas Productions presents the Fun Ideas Podcast.
Hi, this is Mark Arnold, and welcome to Fun Ideas Podcast number 22. Alvin! The story of Ross Bagdasarian Sr., Liberty Records, Format Films, and The Alvin Show is still being typeset. There are photo edits happening now in order to speed things up. Friendly Ghosts, Little Devils, Giants, and Rich Kids, the art and creation of Warren Kremer, is also almost ready to turn in. For real this time. I did get some additional comments by Ernie Colon, so the extra weight by the Kremer family was worth it. Letters. We get letters. I got a kudo from my good friend and former podcast guest, Lee Hester, about the podcast. He says, I always enjoy checking out Mark Arnold's podcast while doing my office work here. There's quite a variety of guests, and I always learn something new. This was another good one. Lee was referring to the recent Denise McKinney episode, so check it out. Our guest today drew comic stories and covers for Harvey Comics in the 1990s, and now for American Mythology. His artwork has graced the cover of Casper, Richie Rich, Tom and Jerry, Underdog, Woodpecker, Pink Panther, and many, many more. So let's not wait a moment longer and bring on Jorge Pacheco. Okay, on the phone I have Jorge Pacheco. Did I say that correctly?
You're right on, Mark.
All right. I don't know if I've ever spoken to you. I've emailed and talked to you and know you and everything for years, and here we are.
I actually think we spoke once, and it was many years ago at the comic convention.
Oh, that's right, but forgot about that.
10 years ago, maybe.
Okay, I forgot about that, but I don't think I formally interviewed you. I don't know. Well, obviously, for Harvey fans, you're known as someone who did a lot of covers and did a lot of stories over the years in the 80s and 90s for Harvey.
That is correct.
And I guess the inevitable million-dollar question is, how did you get started, and how did you get hired by Harvey?
Well, I graduated from the Joe Kubert School in, I think it was 87, and so, of course, the day you get out, you're looking for work, right? So this is the funny story. I actually went into Marvel, and Sid Jacobson, who you probably know was editor at Harvey for many, many years, and then actually, he was my boss at Harvey when I worked there, but obviously I didn't know that at the time. I had an interview with him at Marvel the day after I graduated from the Kubert School. So I go into New York, and Sid had forgotten all about the interview and stuff, and I get there, and his assistant's there. He says, "Oh yeah, Sid completely forgot." So I had an interview with her, and she liked my stuff, and so then Sid the next day, I actually flew back the next day, and he called me the next day when I got back home to California from New York, and he said, "Well, my assistants really liked your work, so can you give a tryout on one of the books?" So I said, "Of course." So I give it a tryout, and it was Heathcliff. I don't know if you remember that character, the other orange cat.
Yes.
And so I did the tryout, and I did not get the job. He wrote me a letter and said, sorry, we don't have work for you at this time, and, I didn't pass the test, so to speak. So then I was looking for work, obviously, and there was a local comic book company called Blackthorn Comics, which was formerly Pacific Comics. So I literally walked in the front door, and that same day I walked out with work. And it was kind of my first big break, other than working for Jim Davis for 2 weeks while I was going to the Kubert School, but that's another story. So I got work, and then my first big book for them was Bullwinkle and Rocky. So my first book was the first, Bullwinkle and Rocky was the first professional job I had, really.
Oh, okay.
And so I was very lucky, and I worked for them about a year and a half, and then they went out of business. So then I went through, about a year and a half of just searching for work. Of course, times were much different because there was no internet, so I tried to get all my work through the mail, which is obviously much, much slower. I would send postcards with, saying, can you give me a call? I can send you samples, and it's very slow that way. So sometimes I'd hear back from, people, and sometimes I wouldn't. But anyway, in the meantime, I went to the comic book stores, and I saw some Harvey Comics on the stand, and I said, well, that kind of would be up my alley since I'm kind of known as a humor guy. So I sent some samples, and this was 1990, early 1990. And lo and behold, I got a call back and says, yeah, we really like your work. Why don't you come in for an interview?
Mm-hmm.
And this is another funny story. So I go in for the interview, and the guy that was going to interview me, his name was Craig Mitchell.
Mm-hmm.
And he completely forgot about the interview like Sid. So I go in there, and so I don't know, I don't even remember who I ended up talking to, but anyway, they did like my work, and so they said, well, we'll give you a call back if we're interested. So I kind of did a couple tryout pages. I sent them some Casper stuff and some hot stuff, and they liked it. They said, well, let's give you a formal interview. This time we'll remember you. So I go in. They actually put me up in a hotel for a couple nights, and I went in and talked to them and met the staff, and I got hired.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny thing is, the editor at the time was Sid Jacobson. But so the guy who didn't give me my first job ended up giving me my first really, really big break, and that was for Harvey Comics. And I was so fortunate because it was really, even now, I mean, I've done so many wonderful projects, and, you know, being a complete freelancer the last, I don't know what it's been, 15, 20 years, it's been great. But my first and biggest love was working for Harvey Comics, without a doubt. It was definitely the happiest time of my life, and I always tease Sid about not giving me work. You know, my first job out, he said, yeah, I kind of made a mistake. I said, no, Sid, you were right. I was a little bit green under the collar. So I definitely grew as an artist working for Harvey. I felt very fortunate. And, you know, like I said, it was a big break. And I know, obviously, you're a big Harvey fan. So, you know, being staff artist was just great. And it was in Santa Monica. And I guess I met my first wife there. So, so it was just a really fun time of life. And I ended up living in Los Angeles and Santa Monica area for 18 years. Mm-hmm. So it was great. I mean, I'd love, if Harvey ever started up again, I'd love to be staff artist again. I mean, I'll put that out there. I don't know if that will ever happen, but it was definitely a joy.
Well, the only one really doing books now is this company called American Mythology, and they're doing a Casper title, but it's so sporadic and haphazard. You know, you could probably tell them, hey, I did Harvey way back when, and they'd go, okay. You know, and but may or may not give you work. I don't know. You know, they're kind of, you know, slapdash. I've recommended people over the time, and I have got a couple stories published with them, but not a Casper one. I've tried. I got Three Stooges and an Ant and the Aardvark one published.
That's great.
The writing.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate with them. I've actually done more than a handful of, you know, probably a dozen jobs with them, you know, 5, 10-page stories. And I've been so fortunate because luckily they really like me, and they've given me the opportunity to do all the artwork, which is really a joy for an artist, you know, pencil, inking, and coloring, and the lettering also. So I've done a couple Pink Panther stories, which I think you saw one. And
right.
The other one still hasn't come out, but and I did an Anne of the Aardvark. I did, gosh, which one did I do? I didn't do Anne of the Aardvark, but I did a couple Fractured Fairy Tales, and actually yesterday I just got a big job with American Mythology of all things, and I signed an NDA, so I can't say with the project I'm working on, but I'm very excited about it. I'm actually working on the cover as I'm talking to you.
Okay, so you are working kind of, sort of. Now, have you done any of the stuff for the Casper titles then?
I have not.
Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting.
And they know that obviously that I was staff artist and, you know, done, I don't know, hundreds of, you know, covers and interior pages for them, but I've never gotten work. But, you know, I've worked on the Bullwinkle books, but it's not necessarily on the bigger characters, you know, on the Fractured Fairy Tales and stuff like that. But it's really been great because obviously comics are my passion.
Right.
And so, you know, I've been just lucky. I mean, I work very hard. I know, you know, you being a writer, you know how it is. You're always, you know, even when you have a job, you're looking for work.
Right.
So, you know, I've just been fortunate the last 10 years. It's funny because I told my second wife when I met her, I told her, I said, well, I'm going to go through times when I go through months where I might not have work. Because with my first wife, it was very early on in my career. And, you know, I might go 2, 3, 4 weeks without having any work. And ever since I've been with her, which has been 13 years now, I think I've had 2 or 3 days where I haven't had work. So I don't know if she's a good luck charm or I've gotten good or I don't know. I don't know the reason, but I've always had work. And I also do live caricatures on the weekends. So that supplements when times are a little bit slower.
Right.
But I feel very blessed to be working with American Mythology. And the funny thing is I'm still always trying to get work, and I've been kind of pegged as a humor artist. So, I've done a lot of humor work, but I've done maybe a dozen or so pages of, quote, realistic work, which I'd really like to get because I've gotten good at being a humor artist, so I'd like the challenge of doing realistic stuff. Not that I'm complaining about doing the humor stuff because I absolutely love it. I love to draw. I don't care what I'm drawing as long as I'm drawing, if that makes sense. And I actually sent some samples to Dynamite Comics a couple weeks ago, and they didn't give me a job on the book that I tried out for, but they gave me, I guess I can say this, I did, which was my favorite band growing up, I did some Kiss sketch cards of all things. So I did the band on these little cards, like baseball cards, sketches, and I guess they sell, they promote it as, an artist did sketches of the characters, Gene and, the band. So that was a fun project. I don't know if I'll be getting more work for them, but it was a fun project. So, maybe I kind of have my toe in the door there too. But I'm always looking for work even when I have work, like I was saying.
Right. Now, when you were looking initially, way back when at the Kubert School, or let's go back a little further. At the Kubert School, what type of art did you typically draw there? Was that more realistic, or was that more cartoony, or a little of everything?
It was probably a little bit of everything, but I got to admit, Mark, I always joke with people that there were 30 people that graduated in the class, and there were many, many good artists. I mean, the big artists that came out of my graduating class, well, not necessarily graduating class, but people that started in my class. Probably the biggest artist that graduated, quote, in my class, he was only 1 year, was Lee Weeks, who does a lot of Superman books, for DC, and Amanda Connor. She was in my class. I'm not sure if she graduated with me. She might have been second year. I can't remember if she's second, third, but she was another big artist. Then Tom McWeeny, who does a lot of inking and for Image Comics, he was another one. But getting back to, I would say that I was probably 20th to 25th best in the class. Like, as far as talent, I wasn't really talented, but I wanted it. So with all the years that have gone by, it's funny that only a few people are still remaining, doing comics. It's kind of a shame because there's so many good artists that were in the class, but I finally got good. And one thing that I guess Joe Kubert himself saw something in me, because I was one of 4 students to do an internship at Jim Davis's, when he had his studio called Pause. I was one of the artists that went in and helped out for a few weeks. So, I guess Joe saw something in me. It was very, flattering. Of course, I was so young at the time. I was 19, 20 years old. I was a dopey kid, so I didn't really know what was going on, but it was really quite an honor to work at the studio. And Jim was I only saw him a couple times, but he was really a sweet, sweet man. And all the artists there they were just tremendously talented. So that was my first break. But I don't think I've ever been the most talented artist, but like I said, in the last 10 to 15 years, I consider I've gotten good. Okay. I actually did this book called Help, which I did about 10 years ago. It was kind of a children's book, or novel, I guess you would say, and it had about 15 illustrations in it. And I don't know why, but for some reason, like, all the skills that I had inside of me kind of came out. And I did the book, and I was so proud of it. And I still have some of that stuff on my website, but I was very proud of it. I think I finally, like, all the stuff that I learned throughout the years kind of came into that book. And so it was kind of like, a benchmark moment, I guess you would say, in my career. And, like I said, the last 10 years I've gotten good. And so now if I got the chance to do some, quote, realistic work, I would like to challenge at it, because I'm not probably that great at it yet. I'm good at it, So it's something I want to grow with. But, like I said, this new job that I got with American Mythology is really a fun book. And the funny thing is, I don't want to say too much about it, but I actually worked on, I'll say, these characters many years ago. I wasn't the artist on the book, but I was the inker on it. So it's kind of funny that it's how things become full circle.
Well, I'll probably know about it pretty soon, but yeah, I'll keep it hush-hush for now, too. But, because it's like, I kind of have an in over there, but, in my way. But I will ask this. Have you tried for their, like, more realistic titles? Like, I think they have Stargate and a couple others like that. Or even the Three Stooges, they tend to draw more realistic.
I gave a couple things a chance, but It's funny, I'm terrible, absolutely terrible with tryouts for some reason. Like, even in school, like, when the word test came up, I would just freeze.
Yeah.
So I think I'm better when I just am given a job, like I relax or something.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I guess even before I start any project, I'm always a little nervous, you know? I mean, even though I've been doing this for 32 years, believe it or not, professionally, I still get nervous at the start of any project. So I'm just not a very good tryout guy. I had a tryout a few years ago of, I don't know, one of my first heroes was Charles Schultz, and I had a tryout on the Peanuts book because they were doing it at Boom Studios, and they thought, oh, this guy would be right up the alley. And I did this tryout, and I did it really quick, and I was so proud of it. I actually did watercolor backgrounds and stuff like the animated shows, and the editor really, really liked it. But I got rejected, I guess, from the Schultz people. I'm not, or, you know, whoever was in charge of the book. So I was really, I don't usually get depressed with tryouts, but Peanuts meant so much to me because it was really one of my, you know, I guess things that I loved growing up so much, and then I got a chance to work on it. I just about was in tears for a week, but that's the nature of the beast, you know. But I always say things come around, so who knows? I may get another chance in the future. And I actually spoke at the museum a few years ago, the Charles Schultz Museum, and it was called Artists in Residence, and there were actually a handful of other artists with me, and two of the prominent ones who I didn't know were going to be there was Thomas Yates and Brent Anderson.
Oh, yeah.
And so it was really an honor being with those guys, and I had like a little lunch with Jeannie Schultz, and she was just about the sweetest lady I've ever met. She just was so nice, and you know, it was really an honor to be there with these other artists. You know, it was really shocking. I always say that I'm Thomas Yates' stalker, because I've always been such a big fan, and so every time he's at the comic convention, I always have him sign a book or two. And I actually, when a few years back, I had an Artist Alley table where I sat next to him, and you know, I kind of gushed over how much I liked his work and stuff. And my wife is German, and her sister got me a Prince Valiant book that was printed in Germany. And I actually brought it to him I think it was 2 years ago now at the comic convention. He says, I haven't even seen this yet. So it's kind of funny, but he signed it for me. He's a really nice guy, and, you know, we've spoken many, many times, but he's a real talent in the field, as you know.
Right. I don't think you should feel too bad about the Peanuts book. I know that's hard to not get a job you really want, but one other person that tried out for that Peanuts book that I know that didn't get it was Frank Hill, who worked on Dennis the Menace for a number of years, and he also did the comic strip Short Ribs. He did some books for Charles Schultz. They were little snoopy educational books that he actually did the drawings instead of Schultz. Schultz was still alive. And so he actually worked for Schultz for a time, and they still turned him down for the Peanuts comic book years later. So.
Wow, I'm a big Frank Hill fan, actually.
Yeah, okay, so you know who he is. I always have to kind of describe, because some people don't know who he is. I should know you know who he is, but for the listeners, I'll say who he is, yeah.
He actually worked for Harvey.
Yes, that's right.
The New Kids on the Block book and block books, and I was really impressed with what he did on that, obviously, and then I kind of found out more about him, and that's kind of, you know, I knew he worked on Dennis the Menace. I didn't know he worked on Peanuts, but he's a talented guy. But I think one thing in our industry, which you know as well as anybody else, Mark, unfortunately, when you do humor work, you're a little bit invisible in the field, you know. So, you know, I'm not one of those people that needs fame or anything like that, but I would just like to get, you know, steadier work, and I think the only way to do that is, you know, obviously getting more realistic work. But like I said, if I, you know, quote, stuck doing humor work, I'm more than happy doing that, because I just like to work. Like I said, I don't care what I'm drawing as long as I'm drawing, because that's where my happiness is. I mean, even though I work, you know, I'm sure you do too, when you freelance, you're always working. Yeah. So I basically work 7 days a week, you know, 10-hour days, and that's, you know, very typical. So, but I enjoy it. I mean, sometimes you know, the hours are long, but I really enjoy it, and I care a great deal about my work. I mean, that's one thing about me. I think that's one reason I've succeeded, is I wanted it so bad, and you know, I've always put my heart into my work. And really, the stuff for American Mythology, I think, is probably my best work, just because I've been able to control it all. You know, the coloring and the inking and stuff, and it's really been a joy, because even though it takes me 4 days to do a page, I really, really enjoy it.
Right.
So, and that's what I'm going to do on this new project. I'm going to be, doing all the artwork, and it's very exciting. Like I said, it's characters that I grew up with, so it's really, really nice. And I feel fortunate. I guess I can name drop a little bit. James Comack over there is my main contact, and he's just been I guess I don't know if a guy wants to be called a sweetheart, but he's been a really sweetheart to me. And and Mike Wolfer also. So I feel fortunate. But I'm a hard worker. Like I say, I care a great deal about the end result.
Right.
So.
And one more thing about Frank Hill in comparison to you, he's going to be 90 next year. He's still looking for the next job. He still likes to work. So,
Wow, I didn't know he was that old. That's awesome.
Yeah, I saw him in August, and he's doing pretty well. But it's funny, he's showing me like his latest thing. He says, I'm working on this now, and I'm working on this, and he works on different things, which I'm sure you do too. You don't just do comics, I'm sure.
No, I'm illustrating some books right now. Well, I guess it's, quote, business books, but they have cartoons in them.
Right.
So I'm actually doing that. It's for a guy of all things, and he lives in Japan. So it's funny, I'm doing work for a guy in Japan right now, and it's funny, when you're a freelancer, you never know where your next job is, and the internet's been such a huge boost to my career because most of my clients I never meet. I send it JPEGs, and I get paid through PayPal or Venmo now, and it's just been huge because, you're a semi-old guy like me, so you remember mail, and, obviously when I first started out, it was much more difficult to get work because I would have to send everything through the mail, and it would take forever, and I would hear back from some companies, and I got a lot of nibbles. I've had a crazy career. Like, some of the stories I could tell you are crazy. I almost was ghost artist for Don Martin, who was one of my heroes growing up, and it was between me and 3 other guys, and I actually spoke to, I can't remember Mrs. Martin's name. I don't know if she's passed, but
no, she's still around. It's Norma Martin, and the guy that actually won that role is Bruce Bollinger. He was the one that was doing it for the time.
So anyway, there you go. You even know more. You know more about my career than me.
For that I know because I did 2 books on Cracked Magazine, so I learned it from that, and I do have a couple questions about the Harvey time, and then we'll move on from other things.
Okay.
But because you mentioned you were going to have the interview with Sid at Marvel and didn't, and then you did get hired eventually, and Sid was there. Did Sid remember you from the previous time or anything, or was it to like, who are you, or what?
It was kind of like, who are you? It was kind of funny because Sid always had the cutest, I don't know if he did this on purpose, but he always had the cutest assistants. And the one assistant, God, I can't remember her name, she was just cute as can be and sweet as can be. And then years back, he knew another person when Marvel had disbanded. He sent me up to Marvel to meet one of his old assistants who still worked at Marvel. I think her name was Teresa Wright. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry. But she was just as pretty as can be and as nice as can be. So, and she used to be his assistant. So, I don't know, but he didn't remember me. But I still had his rejection letter, and I showed it. And I showed it to him. So, like I said, I always tease him about that. But he was completely correct. I was very green out of school, and like I said, it did take me about, oh boy, I'd say 15 years before I got good. Not that I wasn't good, but it took me a while for the talent kind of soak in, So, but it was still professional work, and I was very fortunate, to get it. I really grew as an artist at Harvey. Even I saw myself grow, and I did some good work there, obviously. And now when I worked on the cover for you, obviously, I can tell that I've improved even from when I was working at Harvey. You can plug your book now, by the way.
Okay.
That was a little lead-in for you.
Yay. Let's see. Yes, I have a book, The Harvey Comics Companion, and Jorge helped out coloring the cover that Ernie Colon, I guess he considered, it's penciled. It's actually done digitally, so I don't know if you can call it penciling nowadays, but, that's how that cover was done. And you saw it because it's multi-layer. And,
right. I kind of re-penciled most of it.
So I don't know if what you did was called penciling or what he did was called penciling, but it's in color by you, and so whatever you did, I have a funny story about that. It was supposed to be done on paper as well as a commission,
I wasn't getting the commission, but somebody else was doing it, and Ernie misunderstood it, so it was just done in digital form, and there's a little back and forth. I alluded to this in a previous episode, but I'll actually spill the beans and just say it was Ernie. But I talked to Ernie, and I finally said, Ernie, just do it. He was kind of grumbly because he had to do the work twice, but it's like, it was a misunderstanding. It got straightened out, and everybody's happy now. So, but what's on the cover of the book is the digital version, which I didn't mind having the digital version because I wasn't getting the original art. So, and you did a great job coloring it. We had to adjust it a little bit, if you remember, but that was okay.
Definitely.
We got corrected. So, in fact, I have it sitting here right next to me in case I need to look up any titles or anything. I don't know if I will, but I had another question about, just during the course of the time you were at Harvey, you did interiors you didn't do any interiors on like the Casper and Richie Rich books. You just did covers on those, right?
I did mainly covers. I mean, I did a few specialty books like a Taco Bell book.
That's right, you did. That's right. I forgot about that one.
So I did do some interiors, but it was fairly limited. I mean, Sid would basically... there was an art editor there who, we'll just say he really wasn't into comics. Basically, he didn't really like comics, but he was the art editor, so I don't know. He was really a friend of the boss, really. He wanted to be a writer, so he wasn't even a comic book fan, but he was the art editor. He was a good guy, but he wasn't a lover of comics. But, I did probably do a dozen or so covers on my own, but Sid, for the most part, told me what to do, whether it was a recreation or coming up with a new idea. So I really had very little input into what I was doing.
Yeah.
So Sid was completely in charge. But, for the most part, we had a very good relationship, and I was very happy and very fortunate to work with Sid because, as you know, he's a really sweet guy.
Right. I did finally meet him, but not until you were gone from there. It was about 96 or 97, and they were no longer publishing comic books at that point. So.
Right.
But, that was me... stalking Sid a few times before I finally nailed him down, as it were, because he was supposed to be at San Diego Comic Convention one year and he didn't show, and then one other time I had to leave and he was there, and just craziness.
Right. Did you meet him in Westwood? Because he had an office when he was kind of freelancing for Harvey, and I actually went into the office there and did some work with him.
No, it was still Harvey on Wilshire when it was Harvey Entertainment, and he still had an office, but it was after the comic books, so there was kind of like that little window where he's still there, and and then he went on to do what you're talking about. Now, on interiors on Harvey, you worked on like the New Kids and let's see, what other titles are out there? There's like Crash Test Dummies and Stunt Dogs. I'm trying to think of all the different weird ones that they had.
New Kids on the Block, which Frank Hill worked on. That was my first job that I worked with Ernie Cologne. I worked a lot of the New Kids on the Block stuff, which was pretty crazy stuff. And, obviously it was an honor working with Ernie because he was, someone's work that I enjoyed, long before I knew I would ever be working for Harvey.
Yeah.
So it was really nice. And I've talked to Ernie a handful of times, and he's just as nice as can be. But the funny thing is, it's really nice about him is he will, like if I did do something, because I colored some of his work too, he would give me constructive criticisms, but he was never mean. He said, you might want to do this or want to do that. And here's a guy who's been doing comics, I don't know, for 50 years or whatever, I don't know, but forever, and he still cares about the end result. So he's given me ideas and given me encouragement, and he always liked what I did, so it was very nice. So I'm very thankful that I got to know Ernie, even though it was over the phone. I never met him in person. I did meet his daughter because the day I went into Marvel, actually, his daughter was there picking up a check at Marvel. So that was kind of a funny coincidence. So I talked to her for a minute.
Yeah, so. I've never met Ernie either. Talked to him on the phone when he and Sid did that 9/11 book. I risked sending it in the mail because I wanted them to sign it. So I sent it to Ernie in the mail and gave him postage. She sent it back. Then I sent it to Sid in the mail and gave him postage. She sent it back. And so I got it signed by both of them. And it was a risk because I go, they may not do this or it may get lost in the mail. But I was willing to do it. So
that's awesome. They're good guys. It doesn't surprise me. I've done stuff like that too. A couple years ago, they have a comic convention down here called Comic Fest, and I've been one of the artists there for a couple years, and I've done children's books too. And this lady really I guess elderly lady, she was kind of a grandma, and she really liked the children's books. So I'd like to get this for my daughter. And most of the work that I get, books that I get, I have to buy myself. So I purchase my own books, whether it's comic books or books, and then I sell them at conventions or whatever, and I sell them for what I pay for them. I usually pay $10 for my kids' books. So
yeah.
She didn't have any money, and I said, "Oh, just take it, and you can send me $10 in the mail."
Yeah.
And lo and behold, I kind of forgot about it. 6 months later, in comes this check for $10 for the book.
Wow.
So I guess you got to put your belief in people,
Right. Well, let's see. One other thing on New Kids. I know we're dwelling on New Kids on the Block, but to be honest, there was like 60 issues produced in a very short time.
Yes.
Yeah. My good friend Greg Beda, who still does his own comic strip, he wrote a few of the scripts, and I talk about him in my book. But I just wanted to mention that. I don't think you two work together at all. But then, did you work with Dave Manak? I think Dave Manak did a lot of the.
Dave Manak did a lot of stuff, and I actually penciled probably a dozen so the books that he drew for Harvey. Also, he did Little Dracula, which I inked, and what was the other book? Boy, now I just there's one other book that Beetlejuice. Yeah. Beetlejuice. So I did work with him, and he seemed, he's a talented guy, obviously, and it was nice working with him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think he's still around. I finally found him on Facebook. So he is still around.
Yeah, that's great. Facebook's awesome. I'm glad to hear, I know we're going back to Frank Hill, but I just always admired his work, that he did, and, finding out more about him through Harvey, it was just really nice. And it's always funny to hear about other, artists who get jobs and don't get jobs. Not that it makes me feel better that he didn't get the Peanuts work, but it's just, it's kind of funny because I remember when I did some work for Warner Brothers, and one of the editors there is Kevin Bricklin, who used to work at Harvey with me, and so he gave me a dozen or so jobs with them, and I guess one of the artists for Archie. Now I'm zoning out on his name, but probably my favorite artist for Archie. And I can't think of his name.
Dan Parent.
Not DiCarlo, but the other one.
But Dan Parent or
not
older. You mean
older? He just passed away a couple years ago.
Oh, like Stan Goldberg? Him?
Yes, Stan Goldberg.
Okay.
Stan Goldberg. Sorry about that, Mr. Goldberg. I've always been a fan. He's always been my favorite Archie comic artist. But anyway, he tried out for the Scooby-Doo book, and Kevin rejected him. So it's just funny, no matter how good you are, some books you just don't get work for. So, but it's just it's just funny how every artist is always looking for work and has their ups and downs.
Right. But it's always amazing to me when somebody's rejected that actually was associated with it in the past and could still do it. I mean, it's like, it'd be one thing if you just lost your ability to draw or something through whatever reasons and couldn't do it anymore or something. But, I mean, if you're still able-bodied, can do it and draw it just as good as you ever did, and then you get rejected, we're going to go in a different direction, or who are you, or something that just boggles my mind sometimes. But
yeah, it is odd. I mean, I know the editor when I did for the tryout for the Peanuts book, I know he felt really bad because he liked what I did. So, but you can't help it if it gets rejected. It gets rejected. But like I said, who knows? I'm still waiting for that job. If they call me again, I'm going to give it another shot.
So at least one more Harvey. I can't say there's no more Harvey questions, but at least one more. What was it like in '94 when they just decided we're not going to publish any more comics? What happened? Was it just all of a sudden, or was it kind of you could sense it coming for a period of time? What happened?
Well, this is I'll throw in my Stan Lee reference since he just passed. And, I didn't really see it coming. What happened was, I think you're right, it was around 94, 95. And what happened was we had a meeting with, or I'm going to say we. It wasn't me. It was Jeff Montgomery had a meeting with Stan Lee, and Sid was going to be there, and they invited me to go along since I was, staff artist there. They said, "You want to meet Stan Lee?" And I didn't know the reason why, but at that time, Harvey was just putting out a couple books, with Marvel, a Richie Rich movie adaptation, and then a Casper book. And I was lucky enough to work on both of those, and I think it was both with Ernie Clone.
Right.
But nevertheless, so I go out to lunch with Stan Lee, and what that lunch was about was Marvel buying Harvey Comics. And it looked like it was going to happen. I mean, I had lunch with Stan Lee and stuff, which was really neat. And this was right before cell phones, so I didn't get a picture with him. But but I guess Ari Hammer wouldn't like that anyway, so I didn't get a picture with him. But so it ended up falling through. But it was neat having lunch with Stan Lee, but I really didn't see it coming. But even after that meeting, Harvey stayed around, I think, for another 6 months, and then they just no longer published. So I really don't know what happened. I think basically, I know Jeff and, most of the staff really didn't care about comics. It was more of they wanted to get the entertainment movie part of it. So once that wasn't happening, I think they decided just to disband. Now, I don't know if that is, completely true or not, but that's what I read from it.
Well, what kind of happened, in research, yes, the part that is correct is once the Casper movie came out and was a hit, they said, oh, well, we don't need to do comic books anymore. And it's like, well, you kind of do, but, I wasn't there to tell them that. And because you're not really a movie company. They were thinking they were Disney, and it's like, but even Disney still publishes comics to this day, although they've had long gaps too. But, and then eventually Jeff Montgomery, because he made it a publicly traded company, got ousted from the company. So that was the end of him at the company. So,
I didn't even know that. So you know a little bit more because I wasn't on the business side, obviously, but I know one thing. I've actually tried to. I don't know what happened to Jeff, but he's kind of disappeared.
I don't know what happened to him after that happened. It's like Harvey went on for like a couple more years without him, and I forgot the guy who followed up with him, but then eventually got bought by Classic Media, and then now it's owned by NBC Universal and a big mega corporation, all that stuff. So anyway.
But Jeff was always really sweet to me, and he always liked the art department. I mean, I didn't see him on a daily basis, but he would come back and say hi, and he always treated me very well. And I'm one of those people that are always I'm very grateful for the work that I get, and obviously working for Jeff and Harvey, like I said, was definitely the highlight of my career. Just the steadiness of the work and the enjoyment of it, and I can never thank him enough for giving me the opportunity. And he was just a nice guy, and so it was, like I said, it was really the happy time of my life. I mean, I'm still having a great time, but it's easier when you don't have to, look for work.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, if you have the word staff in your title, I guess that's a good thing when you're an artist. Yes. So what was the first jobs you got immediately after?
Well, Sid was still like packaging stuff, and I think it was through Harvey, and also he did some Hanna-Barbera stuff. So I was still doing some work for Sid and some stuff with Ernie and Sid. So I still had work with Sid, which was really great. I was still freelancing, obviously, so I would get other jobs. And I think I got my first children's book job around that time, too. So, I was freelancing, but that's when the Internet was kind of booming. So, like I said, it was really a lot easier to get work, even though, it still was a struggle to a point. But I was still working with Sid, doing some Harvey stuff, kind of leftover work, and then doing the Hanna-Barbera stuff. So it was nice, And
and I know he was doing some advertising things. I'm sure you helped out on those too.
Right, I did. I mean, Sid gave me a lot of work. I was very fortunate that we had such a good relationship that he kept me on. Sid was a very loyal editor. He would use a lot of the same artists and writers, like I guess most editors do. Yeah. So
well, definitely Sid. Yeah, it's like when he went to Marvel. He pulled everybody he could from Harvey, and then when he went back to Harvey, he pulled everyone he could from Marvel. So it's like, and some people didn't go because of retiring. Some people didn't go because they liked being at the company they were at. But it's like for the most part, people would be loyal. So now you also worked at Archie eventually because you did the Hanna-Barbera stuff, which went to Archie. after Harvey started it. So, did you work there?
Yeah, I did a handful of actual Archie books, like I did Archie himself. So I did, a handful of stories for them. But this is kind of a sad story. It was funny because, I don't know, I always thought Archie was above what I could do. Like, I was still not, like, I don't know, 100%, I don't know, I was never really one of those people that bragged about what I could do, so I always thought I wasn't good enough. I was competing with Dan DiCarlo and Stan Goldberg, so I always thought, I'm competing against these guys, and I'm just not good enough.
Well, true. So, those guys were still around when about this time we're talking about in the 90s. That's true.
Right. So, I kind of felt inferior in some ways, so I kind of didn't stick with it just because I didn't think I was good enough. But looking back, I think my stuff was good enough and probably would have gotten better. Obviously, when you work on anything, you get better with it with time. But I don't know, I just didn't feel like I was good enough, so I kind of did a few jobs and then kind of looked elsewhere. Yeah. So it was kind of, I don't know what the word is, but not confidence in my own, in my abilities.
Of course, they're still around. You could always do something. And I know that they're starting to veer back into the cartoony, DiCarlo look, after being kind of really realistic for a few years, so.
Yeah, they do a lot of stuff, and obviously you mentioned Dan Parent. He was one of the other graduates in my class.
Okay.
So we graduated the same year. So.
Yeah, it seems like you're about the same rough age or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know Dan too. I've met him a few times, so yeah, it's like he's very.
Yeah, he's a very nice guy.
Yep. Going into like the 2000s, so where did you go next after working with Sid?
Well, then I went through a divorce. Then I ended up coming back. This was 2003. I moved back down to San Diego because my family was. So I was kind of starting over. And, still doing a few jobs for Sid. And my friend Kevin Bricklin, like I said, he was working at Warner Brothers, so he would send me some work too. So in some ways, I was kind of starting over when I moved back down because I didn't know when you're a freelancer, you never know what's next.
Right.
So I was kind of freelancing, but I was getting sporadic work, so I was still getting enough work in to survive. And then I kind of, at that time is when I kind of picked up doing caricatures on the weekend, which has really been a huge part of my income the last 10 or so years. And so, like I say, when things are slow, I can kind of fall back on doing the caricatures.
Right.
So, but I've been, like I said, the last probably 2.5 years, I've been fortunate to do so much work for American Mythologies. But in the meantime, I've done a couple children's books, illustrated some books itself, and so I've always, I've really always had work, so I can't complain. And obviously, I did a little freelance for you, and that's I kind of joke, I kind of make my living at, I say $200 at a time because I might do a cover here, a couple interior pages there, or an ad, or I kind of never know what's coming next. But even the job that I got from American Mythology yesterday was kind of out of the blue. Because they were kind of always sending me work, but I went through probably 3 months of a little bit of a dry spell with them for the first time in the last year and a half. And, James said, Mr. Comack said that, he was looking for work, and I knew he was, and then he called me and says, you want to take this job? And I said, of course. So, even that was out of the blue, but in the meantime, I was working on, like I said, some illustrations for a guy that lives in Japan. So I'm still working on that too and starting on this new project. So I'm very, very busy.
So you basically do anything and everything freelance if you can, or is it just some things you don't want to do, or you're not that discriminating, as it were?
No, I'm not picking. If someone has work, I do it. My wife, at first especially, didn't understand why I was taking 2, 3, 4 jobs at a time. Like, I'd just be crazy busy sometimes. I say, honey, I said, I don't know if I'm going to get a job in the next 6 months. I have to take the work, because early on, especially as an artist, I went through, weeks and months where I might not have much work. So now when I get work, even now, I'm kind of scared of it. I guess it's like someone, when you hear they're really poor growing up, they're always, and then now they're millionaires or whatever, they're still worried about making $1, or, maybe they still go to Walmart even though they have millions of dollars. So, that's kind of the way I am with work. I'm always looking for work even though I have it.
Yeah, well, it's just like any other creative endeavor, if you're an actor, it's like, you don't want to just sit doing nothing, and some actors, they'll do a movie while they're doing a TV series and commercial and blah blah blah, because the next year it might all be canceled and you might be pounding the pavement looking for something new. So yeah. So
you are exactly right, Mark.
So
that is exactly right.
I mean, I do the same thing with writing. Yes, I mean, I do get the books out, so I have my kind of, if I have a comparison to Harvey or American Mythology or something, is really Bear Manor. It's like, I've been fortunate once I linked up with them, is every time a book comes out, now what do you want to do? It's not like, well, thank you very much, see you later. So it's like, so that's kind of consistent. And then I have consistency through Tomorrow's with articles with back issue and sometimes alter ego and things like that. So I have consistency.
That's great.
There.
That's awesome.
So, I know what it's like, but then there's some times where it's like, I can't catch a break here, It's like, what's going on? So
sometimes you do go through little periods that are a little bit scary. I actually got some freelance work about 8 months ago with someone that I worked with many, many years ago, and he kind of popped out of the blue again. And it's one of the first jobs that I can say that I wasn't really into. I don't know. I don't want to say too much about it because he's a nice guy, but I was basically drawing flowers. And I like flowers, don't get me wrong, but it was kind of cartoony flowers, and I can only take so much of drawing cartoony flowers, so it's a job that I didn't keep doing. I did a few illustrations for him, but I said my flower days are over, so that's it.
So you have let's see, all the different choices and stuff. Is there anything you'd like to work on that you may never have tried before? And I'll throw some things out there like Mad Magazine, or even Marvel, DC, or what else is out there? Or like I said, Archie. Is there anything that appeals to you that you'd like to work on, assuming you get the opportunity? Or
I would like I said, I did a tryout for Dynamite, and I actually did a tryout for Barbarella. It wasn't necessarily for Barbarella. It was just, quote, doing more realistic work. And so I would love to work on a book like that, or I've always been a big Red Sonja fan. That might be a little bit, above me right now with my talent as far as realistic stuff. But I also I've always been kind of that kind of person that likes, I call them B comics. So it's not that they're bad comics, but they're kind of silly comics.
B for bad. No,
they're realistic comics, like something like the $6 Million Man, or which Dynamite does. I love those kind of books. I think they're really silly and fun. They kind of remind me of childhood, and they're just fun, silly books, like a Superman book or a Spider-Man book. I mean, that's got obvious prestige, but to be honest, I wouldn't want the pressure or wouldn't want to do something like that. I'd like a smaller book, or
so you like the stuff that Charlton used to put out in the 70s or something that type of. Okay, I get it. Okay.
Yeah, and like Xena and stuff like that. Those are books that I really, really enjoy, and I get a laugh out of them. I enjoy reading them, and they're just fun, silly books, And so that's the kind of book that I would like to do. But I wouldn't turn anything down. I mean, I know what I'm competing with. I don't have to. Neil Adams isn't shaking in his boots about me getting a job. I'm not going to be taking his work away. So I'm just, like I said, Mark, I'm just happy to be in the business, and I'm happy to be working. And anybody that gives me the opportunity. One thing about me, I do my best. I never am lazy, and I care a great deal about the end results, because I'm one of those people that if I'm going to do a book, I want to enjoy it. I want to be that little kid that went to the Five and Dime and bought the comics off the spinner rack and got excited about it. So I want kids to enjoy that, whether it's a superhero book or it's doing the Anna the Aardvark or whatever it may be, or Fractured Fairy Tales. And I know you've seen my work, especially on the Pink Panther.
Right.
I was really proud of that, because to me it's kind of like a cross between Disney and Sergio Aragonés. So it's kind of craziness, and I like people to see it and be amazed by the work. I want them to enjoy it.
Now, here's the weird off-the-wall question. What do you like to do for fun when you're not doing artwork or comics?
Well, I like to sleep. That's one of my favorite.
Okay.
No, but seriously, I have two children. I have a son and a daughter, and I obviously enjoy time, spending time with my family, my wife, and my kids. I guess I'm kind of a boring guy. I either work or, I do like sports too. I used to be a good athlete, and I play tennis, and I go to the gym. But I spend a lot of time with my family when I can. And being a freelancer, I was my son's soccer coach this last I guess fall. And so that was fun. So just spending time with my family and working out and trying to catch a little sleep. But like I said, being a freelancer, I'm basically working 7 days a week, so I don't get a lot of free time. But tomorrow we're gonna go to one of my kids' friends' birthday party, and they're having an event through the school, through Barnes and Noble. We're gonna have, like, you sell a book and the school gets a little donation, so we're gonna go help out with that. And so we just do little things like that, but it's fun.
Yeah. Do you do any personal appearances, like at conventions? I know you mentioned the Schultz Museum, but anything else like that, or?
I actually did a little thing at the Chuck Jones Museum a few years ago, which was a lot of fun too. I'd like to do more, but I hate to say it, Mark. Like I said, when you do humor work, you're not as in demand as if I was doing Spider-Man or something.
I know what you're talking about. Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, even before we were doing this interview, I said, I'm not I'm not super famous. I just happen to be a good artist who works in the business, but. Right. But I appreciate you giving me this opportunity.
Well, I mean, the whole purpose of this podcast, and I tell people this all the time, it's a pop culture podcast, and I'm not going to sit there and say, no, you can't be on it because you're not famous. It's like, if you have a voice and you have, like 1 week, which I just posted it up recently, he was talking about what's good to buy for Marvel and DC Comics. Now, he's not a known quantity. His name was Alan Bryan, but he kept it interesting and kept talking about it, and I'm cool with that. And then I had another interview with a lady named Denise McKinney. She's going to be before your show, so it'll be aired by this point. She collects matchbook covers and things like that, but...
That's cool.
But, as long as you can talk about it and make it sound semi-interesting, it's like, I mean, if you were going, I worked for Harvey, and, I guess that was it. Like, if you were like Howard Post, no, I don't know if you know my reference there, but apparently Howard Post, and I never really talked to him. I think I wrote to him once and he wrote back. But apparently at Harvey, this is in the old days prior to you working there, he hated working for Harvey. He did it because it was a paycheck, but he couldn't stand doing that stuff, which is kind of disappointing because he did a pretty decent job on Hot Stuff and Little Audrey and a few other things, and he was there for quite a long time. But to just not like it, it just seems kind of strange. Why would you do it? But
yeah, yes, people do things for a paycheck. I mean, I guess I understand where he's coming from. I mean, like I said, really, other than the flower job, I really have had very few jobs that I haven't wanted to do. I mean, I couldn't even count it on one hand.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Was there any job at Harvey or anywhere else that you're just like, not this again?
Obviously I did like some more than others, but, it's just the drawing and the creativity that I enjoy. So, I've never, like I said, I don't really turn down work. So I guess part of it's fear that I won't get more work, but I do like the challenge of whatever it is that I have to draw, because everything is different, So even if, I'm doing one book, and even if it's a humor book, it's still going to be different than the one I did previous. So it's still a challenge, and it's still fun, and it gives me, that outlook for that creativity, I can get it out.
Yeah. And you're in good company with the other artists at Harvey. Like Warren Kremer in interviews said he really enjoyed working for Harvey, and I interviewed his kids, because I'm doing a Warren Kremer book that should be out some year. But he really, really enjoyed doing the Casper and Richie Rich stuff and the other stuff he did. The only thing I found out in interviews and everything that he didn't like is one time Harvey did a comic book on the cow sills. I don't know if you've ever seen that one.
I've never seen that one, actually.
Which is kind of like your New Kids on the Block, but of the 60s, there's only one issue, and it's called Harvey Pop Comics, and it was of the cow sills, and it's kind of a collector's item now, but Kremer did about a third of it or something, and just said, I'm done, I can't. And I think Ernie and one other artist, I can't remember off the top of my head, finished it off. It might have been High Rosen or something, just to finish it off, because Warren was just not into it. It was one of the few times where he was just that way. But apparently, like Ernie, he came and left sometimes at Harvey, but overall, to this day, he enjoyed working there and stuff like that. So.
Well, that's great. Yeah, Warren Kremer, obviously, I mean, his talent was immense. I mean, he was basically the Carl Barks of Harvey Comics.
Yeah.
So, I always admired his work. And I think one thing that's a shame is that a lot of people, I mean, even for me, haven't seen a lot of his realistic stuff, but when you Google it or whatever, it's tremendous work. Obviously he's known for Casper and stuff, and obviously all the other characters too. But his realistic stuff is just wonderful, and I don't know how much in your book you're going to have that, but
a lot. I have a lot of artwork from pulps and pre-Casper and Richie Rich, so the horror stuff, some war stuff, some romance stuff. Stuff he did at the other publishers, Ace and St. John, stuff like that. It's just, I just have to get the sign off from the family, so they're taking their time, which is fine.
Right.
But I'd like to see it published. So, it was supposed to be done a few months ago, but family issues came up, and so I've been very patient with them. So hopefully, sometime in 2019. So.
That's great. I'll definitely be picking that up for sure. But yeah, he's obviously a huge talent, and it's good to hear that he enjoyed his work. I mean, I don't know. I don't understand anybody being an artist if they don't enjoy it, because obviously there are very few, unless you're a Jim Lee or Jack Kirby or Neil Adams or whoever it may be. It's tough to make a living at it. So if you're doing something as being an artist, I don't know why you would do it if you didn't enjoy it.
Right. But I did ask this, which you already answered for yourself, is like I asked if Warren missed doing like the horror stuff or anything like that. And, for him, according to the interviews with him and with others, it's like he was just always happiest with the current stuff he was doing. So I'm doing horror stuff that's kind of graphic now. And now I'm doing Casper and Richie Rich. It's no big deal. This is what I'm doing. I like it.
Yeah, that's great. Well, obviously he was talented at both, and he's definitely once in a lifetime artist. I mean, there's so many artists who are great nowadays. I mean, I didn't know what we're going to be talking about today, but I kind of wrote a little list of a lot of artists that I like and that I admire. But
well, read them off if we haven't talked.
Well, I think probably the best drawer, I think, in comics today, and he's been around for, 40 or 50 years, is Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. I think he's awesome. I mean, he's an artist that other artists admire, just how well he can draw. And there's a lot of young guns that are very, very good, too, like Sean Murphy, who's doing Batman now. His work just blows me away. And then this guy, Brandon Peterson, and if I pronounce any of these names wrong, I'm sorry, David LaFluent, and, he worked on Spider-Man, and this Ronald, oh boy, I'm going to butcher this last name, Boshi, I don't know, it's Boschi. He did The Winter Soldier. He does a lot of work for Marvel, and I think his work is wonderful. And Dan Pasorni, he did Conan and Red Sonja, and a lot of stuff for Marvel and DC and Dark Horse. But there are just so many good artists that I admire, and even like someone like Kevin O'Neill, who worked on League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I mean, he's been around for a long time, but I really admire his work. And but I like a lot of the old time guys too, like Kirby and Colin, and I love Frank Thorne's work. That's one reason I've always wanted to work on Red Sonja, because I always like Frank Thorne's Red Sonja. I actually met Frank Thorne, by the way, many years ago. He was a super nice guy, and the thing I remember is he was showing us his artwork, and his wife came in and gave us lemonade, and I thought that was really sweet. So she was a sweet lady too. But I grew up reading comics, and I'll get into the story real quick about how I got into comics. My stepfather owned a liquor store, and one day he brought home some beat-up, creeping, eerie, and Vampirella comics. And so I got all these horror comics, and I loved monsters because I was a Universal Monster fan. And so this was great. And then he brought home some comics off the spinner rack that were beat up, and my first one was the issue with Fing Fang Foom.
Oh, wow.
Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko in the back, and a Superman by Kurt Swan. He hit a golf ball onto the moon, which I must have read that comic a million times. It was in tatters. So those are what I grew up with. But he brought home comics, and I just loved it. Like I said, dinosaurs and monsters and Godzilla and stuff like that were my thing, so I was always drawing those things. So that's how I got into comics. And obviously I also read, the lesser, I guess the smaller companies like Dell and stuff like that. I always liked Richard Corbin was probably one of my favorite artists and still is.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I don't know, I just always loved comics, and I feel fortunate to be making it. I always say it's semi-living at it. Because I'm always a month behind on every bill, but which isn't too bad for an artist, I guess.
Yeah. Now, before you went to the Jack Kirby school, just like when you were a kid. I said that wrong. Joe Kubert school. Take two. Joe Kubert school. Why did I say Jack Kirby? Well, you said it a few minutes ago. But Joe Kubert school. When you were a kid, which artists did you try to imitate or emulate or admire at that point when you first were getting into it?
Probably when I was getting into it, I was a huge Neil Adams fan and Jack Kirby, but, it's funny, I guess as a kid I didn't really know their names as much as just thinking their work was cool, but I drew a lot of humor stuff, especially in Peanuts. Charles Schultz was huge. I used to draw Snoopy and Charlie Brown all the time, but I also loved Don Martin, and so I used to draw. I had this big, thick book of Don Martin's work, and I just used to draw, his crazy drawings all the time. I used to emulate those, and that's what was kind of funny, that I was in the running, to be his ghost artist, which I thought was kind of funny. This was many years later, obviously.
Right.
It's funny how, it is kind of a small industry, and, all the near misses I've had, I guess big breaks, but I've had a lot of breaks too. I've missed a lot and I've gotten a lot. It's just funny. I don't think you could write it. You couldn't script out my career in a way because it's been so crazy up and down, and but it's been quite a ride. That's the whole thing. It's always been fun, and I don't regret it. But like I said, obviously we're talking a lot about Harvey. Harvey was really the defining moment in many ways for me. It really, put me on the scene as far as being known and getting work out there. So in some ways, I always feel like I was getting paid to get my name out there in a way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was a very happy time of life too. And I don't know. It's funny in life. I'm sure you look back on your life too, Mark, and the happiest times in your life, you don't know you're having fun, but you are.
Right. Right.
Probably like I said, the happiest times were the Kubert School. That was just a blast. All my friends, and now with Facebook, I can stay in touch with them, and Harvey, and and even the job with American Mythology has been just huge. I never would have foreseen this, getting to work with them, and being so fortunate to get so much work with them, and I kind of have my toe now in Dynamite. I don't know if I'm going to be getting more work with them, but at least I did a little bit of work with them, and I just like being given the opportunity. It doesn't matter who I work for. I'm not a comic snob as far as which company. I just like to have the opportunity, and if they hire me, great, and if they don't, I understand too. So I just keep plugging away and doing my best.
Just made me think of one other thing. I know we're jumping around a bit, but we keep mentioning the Joe Kubert School. Now, I used to just see the ads for it and knew it was in New Jersey, right? Is that where it was?
Yeah, Dover, New Jersey.
Yeah. And it's like, for me, it was kind of like, oh, I could do that as a pipe dream. It's like I never really thought about it seriously because I was in Northern California, and I just figured that's on the opposite coast. What am I doing going out there? And although I like to draw, I never really pursued it as a career like you do, or did, or do.
Yeah, I do. It's all three of those.
Do and did. Yeah, but how did you? And this may have changed since, but how does one get into the Joe Kubert School?
Well, at the time, obviously things may be different, but basically you kind of sent. Well, now you can email, of course. But I used, I sent samples through the mail, and obviously I had tons of comic book, and it was basically swipes. I was swiping Joe Kubert, Neil Adams, Jack Kirby. So basically they were seeing swipes from me and at that time I didn't know what a swipe was. I was so young I didn't realize it, but I sent my portfolio in, and I guess they saw potential. But I always wondered, because now it's, when you have to realize when I was going, this was 1984, 85 when I went, school wasn't as big a deal as it is now. I think it's much more difficult to get in because throughout the years I actually taught a couple semester at UCLA, the extension class, when I lived up there, and one of the students in there I recommend, because he loved comics, and I recommend that he gave a tryout to the Kubert School, and he did not get accepted. Now, he was every bit as good as I was at his age, so I don't know if it's become more difficult, or, I don't know the whole story.
Probably,
yeah. Yeah, so I think it's a little tougher to get into the school now than it was, because it's more prominent, but timing, they say timing in life is everything, and we were also, which I always kind of brag about, we were the last class to be in the mansion, which they used to have the school in a mansion, then they moved to a high school. So my first year was the last year they had in the mansion, which was really, really a cool thing. So it was like basically this old spooky house we had our classroom in, which was really, really neat. And and for lunch we'd go downstairs in this really like dark, damp dungeon kind of, cellar, and we'd have lunch there. It was really neat. I mean, at the time, like I say, I didn't know I was having such a good time until you look back on it.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
On classes in it, this is my ignorance about it. I mean, was it all drawing, or were there other things like sculpture or painting or every type of art, or what?
I would say yes and no. I mean, it was all revolved around, obviously, comic books. So, we were learning color, we were learning inking skills, we were learning lettering. I mean, basically anything you could do in comics. And one year they had Greg Hildebrand. I think it was Greg. I'm not sure if it was brother. I don't want to mix that up. But anyway, he worked at the school, so they had painting classes with him. Obviously, he's a super talent. But we had such good instructors. I mean, obviously we had Joe Kubert, which was really great. And like I said, Joe was just so great to me. I mean, I look back on it now, like I say, and he saw something in me, which, sometimes I was, even like I said, when I was working at Archie, I didn't know that I had the talent. I was always worried that I wasn't good enough. So I think he saw something in me, which really meant a lot to me. So, and we had the artist Jose Delbo, who's kind of famous. He drew the Superman strip and Wonder Woman, and he's just the sweetest man. But he was a very, very good teacher, and he was tough on us too. Like, I don't know if I could swear on a podcast. He says, "This is crap." So he would say that, and he had a very heavy Spanish accent, so it was really funny. But he was just a wonderful man and a great instructor. And I would say out of all the teachers, I probably learned the most from him, even though at the time I didn't know it. It kind of sunk in. Like all the stuff I learned at the Kubert School kind of took me a couple years later to sink in. But I just think it was my talent level. Like it took me a few years to catch up where I got to be good. So, and they have Hi Eisman there, who does the Popeye strip and Katzenjammer Kids and stuff. And that's another thing. I mean, we've talked about what I would like to do. I mean, one thing that I've always dreamed about doing, like I say, I enjoy doing any kind of work, but I'd love to work on a classic comic strip like Popeye or the Katzenjammer Kids that, the Hi Eisman works. I mean, obviously he's getting in there, up there in age too. I think he's about 9 years old. And
not to be morbid, there might be a job opening.
Yeah, I know. I hope Hi lives for another 20 years. Yes. He was just really, really a nice man. I learned a lot from him. But it was funny, or not funny, but just odd. A couple months ago, the guys that were doing Alley Oop, the strip, I guess they retired, and I said, "Hey, this is an opportunity for me." I said, "I should do some samples for it," and I've just been so busy, with the kids and with work and stuff, and I was going to do a tryout, and then they said it wasn't going to happen anymore, and then literally like 2 weeks ago, they got a new artist team. So I didn't even get a chance to try out for it, but I'd love to do a syndicated strip, and I know newspapers are kind of a dying form, but I'd love to do that too. Just, it could be, like I said, it could be any classic strip. I mean, there's so many artists who picked up, wonderful strips like Snuppy Smith and, stuff like that. Because, like I said, Charles Schultz was probably my first hero. So I grew up with comic strips. And obviously someone like Thomas Yates is doing Prince Valiant. I'm not saying I would be talented enough to do that. But, something like that would be awesome too. Dick Tracy would be awesome. Obviously, Joe Staten's doing an incredible job. So, I mean, there are just so many strips. I mean, there's so many ways to make a living as an artist. I would never limit myself to one, though. Whatever would come along, I'm happy to do.
And let's see, one last question about Kubert School, since we're talking about it. How long do you go? I mean, is it a 4-year course or?
It's a 3-year school, and I think it's 3 years still is. And I went all 3 years. A lot of artists, like someone like Lee Weeks, who, let me put it this way, he was tremendous the first year. I mean, he went 1 year, and he was already he could have been. Well, I think he got jobs right away, but he was already so talented that he didn't really need to go to the school. Some guys were just so talented that they don't need to go. But I know that most of the artists that were in my class did stick with it. And, you know, someone like Grant Meme, I'll give him a plug, good friend of mine. He did a ton of stuff for Marvel and DC, and he's doing stuff for Boys Life. And he was one of the better artists in my graduating class, and he's still doing comics. And so, I mean, we had a very good class, but as you know, I mean, you could probably pick up any comic book at the comic book shop, and he or she was a Kubert School alum.
Right. Okay, well, I was just curious about it because, like, my exposure to it was just always ads in the back of the books, you know. Yeah. Or
that's how I got into the school. I mean, I saw the ad, you know, I saw Joe Kubert, and obviously I knew his work, and I saw the little ad, you know, go to the Kubert School. I'm all, hey, this could be for me. Yeah. So, and that's what happened. So I sent my samples in. It was good enough, and I guess the rest they say is history.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess that's all I have to talk about today. I always give everyone a chance to plug websites or anything else they want to plug. So do you have anything you'd like to plug or promote? Right?
I guess I have my website. I guess if people want to see what I'm talking about, I have to actually update my website, but it's www.pachecotunes.com, and it's PACHECOTOONS.com. Mm-hmm. So it's pachecotunes.com, and I would love people to check my work out. And Mark, I really appreciate you interviewing me and obviously giving me the little work that you gave me. And you know, it's really been a pleasure. You know, I'm always so happy to promote comics, and I don't even know if it's promoting myself as much, but you know, just any way to get the word out there about comics in general, I'm always happy to be a part of.
Well, very good, and I thank you very much for being a podcast guest. And, of course, we'll stay in touch and everything else, and good luck to your future artistic endeavors.
Yeah, well, in a few months you'll be seeing the book that I was not talking about tonight.
Yes.
So you'll be seeing that should be out in a couple months, because I'm just, like I said, I'm literally just starting on it tonight. So I'm excited about it, and hopefully all your podcast fans can pick it up.
Well, let me know, and then I'll plug it on at the end of a future podcast. So
that would be great, Mark. I really appreciate it. And like I say, thank you so much for having me on.
All right. And we will talk soon. Thank you very much.
We definitely will. Thanks again, Mark. Have a good night.
You too.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you for listening, and thank you again, Jorge Pacheco, for being my special guest. Episode number 23 will be coming soon. If you'd like to comment and or be a guest on this podcast, please drop me a line at funideas.mark@gmail.com. You can become a Patreon of Fun Ideas Productions, and if everyone listening out there just contributed $1 a month, that would be a tremendous help. This has been the Fun Ideas Podcast. This is Mark Arnold speaking. This episode is copyright 2019 Fun Ideas Productions. Thank you very much, and have a good night.